love so much about this game, but there's some stuff that's getting on some people's nerves. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on GameRank's 10 things players hate about Elden Ring. Now, just as a quick disclaimer, we love Elden Ring. This game is phenomenal. Like Jake said in his Before You Buy, some of us are a little more casual, some of us are a little more into it. I'm of the mind that Elden Ring is going to have a huge influence on open worlds. Of course, some things are going to get on some people's nerves, and putting that stuff together isn't a dig on the game. If anything, it's evidence that we like spending time in this world. Starting off at number 10, though, are all the allegedly funny notes. So one of the best things about Souls games is how much of a community experience it is. As you wander through the world, you can find notes left by other players that offer encouragement, warn you about difficult sections ahead, or offer clues about secrets. In a perfect world, all these notes would be for supporting each other, but in reality, most of them are dumb jokes, some trolling, other such nonsense. On their own, they can be pretty funny. How they work is that you're given a set of keywords to use, and because of this, they're usually fairly clipped and awkward sounding, but in some ways that makes them funnier. Finding a note that says try jumping in front of a bottomless pit can be amusing the first time, but it doesn't last. You see that same note by a pit a million times, and it's like, all right, I get it. You only laugh so many times at something that says try fingers, butthole. Although I will say saying it out loud is pretty funny. But that's what people hate about these things. It's not that the jokes are bad. A lot of the funny notes people leave around are pretty great. It's limited. And anything that's limited and based in creativity is you're eventually going to hit a wall and it gets old. If you're playing online and you're inclined to read the notes left by other people just in case there's a legitimate message in there somewhere, they're doubly annoying because for every actual useful note, you'll probably get 3 to 5 troll messages or goofy jokes. It's kind of a love-hate situation because when you do find something legitimately fresh and you get a good laugh, it's great. But getting another hidden path here message in front of a regular wall, it gets tiresome. And number 9 is Margit, the first boss who's like randomly hard as balls. There are a lot of new people experiencing a Souls game for the first time with Elden Ring. And while it's challenging in general, one thing that really puts a stop to basically everyone's progress is this one dude, Margit, the Fell Omen. He's the first required boss in the game, and he is a doozy. The level of aggression on this guy is nuts. He's incredibly fast and he attacks almost nonstop. It's especially true when he gets to his second phase and he adds a magic hammer to the repertoire. Even as a Souls veteran, I struggled with this dude for a while. That is how tough he is. It's not a surprise that a huge portion of the audience is struggling with this guy, and a lot of people just straight up hate him. I can't really blame anybody for feeling that way either. It sucks to die once from a boss, let alone like a dozen times or more. It's a rough fight for people who are used to playing Souls games, where dying is just something you get used to, but for people who aren't, it probably feels worse. It is so satisfying to finally take this guy down, though, and once you get good enough, it gets easier, and you feel kind of a grudging respect for him, but until then, the only thing most players are going to be feeling is hate. And number 8 is creating the perfect character and then never seeing them again. Like, this is a common Souls series problem, not something new to this game, but still, it is especially bad here because the character creator is really good this time around. Yeah, you can still make hideous monsters, but you can make some pretty cool looking characters. So if you're like the type who digs in on character customization, you can spend an hour or more in the character creator. I don't even think that's vaguely strange. It's just a shame that you never see it. After exhaustively creating the perfect character, you enter the game, find a suit of armor with a helmet, and you never see your face again. All the time messing with facial sliders is basically pointless. I mean, it's kind of an exaggeration. There's more armor that actually shows your face in this game than usual for the series, and there are other ways to see your character, but there are a whole lot of armor sets where what you are underneath means nothing. Man, woman, ogre, it does not matter. Y'all look the same in that suit of armor. It's a minor annoyance, and one Souls players probably have come to expect at this point, but it really stings here because, like we said, the character creator is actually great in this game, so there's a bit more reason to actually use it. And number 7, being forced to kill the pot boys. Everyone's favorite new character in the run-up to the release of Elden Ring is this dude, Alexander, a big guy who's also a pot for some reason. He's pretty friendly. He'll even help you out if you rescue him at the start of the game, but if you were expecting all the other pot people in the game to be as friendly as him, you're gonna be disappointed. Most players probably running their first wild pot guys. They seem friendly at first, but if you approach them, they'll turn on you pretty quick and you'll be forced to kill them. The little ones aren't tough, but the big guys can mess you up with their big spinning attack if it manages to connect. The pod people are kind of this game's equivalent to the mushroom men from Dark Souls. They're outwardly goofy and harmless looking, but if you get too close, they will mess you up. Like those guys, certain fans just don't want to hurt these guys, and when they're forced to, they don't enjoy killing them. Taking some of these guys out also reveals their nasty secret. Inside their pot is just a disgusting meat slurry. Even Alexander's like that. He apparently puts the corpses of dead warriors in his pot to increase his strength. Taking out certain pot men drops the appetizing sounding raw meat dumpling. So yeah, I guess killing them isn't all bad. And number 6, dying with a lot of runes and then immediately slipping off of a cliff and then dying again. The classic Souls blunder returns in a big way with Elden Ring. How death works in these games has remained basically unchanged since Demon Souls. You get some currency, whether it's souls or something else, from killing enemies, which you spend on items and shops. You upgrade your character, but if you die, then any souls or blood echoes or runes or whatever, they get left at the spot that you died, and the only way to get back to them is to go to the place you died in and pick them up again. If you die before that, they're gone forever. And with Elden Ring, they've actually gotten rid of some of the harsher penalties incurred in other games, like lowering your maximum health. But this key feature remains, and it's still a source of frustration among players, especially among a lot of the new ones who are just playing a Souls game for the first time. It's bad enough when you lose your runes normally, but it really sucks when you collect a ton of them, like more than enough to level up multiple times, and you end up like dying to some random enemy. Okay, just head back up and get your runes, right? Shouldn't be a problem, but oops, your finger slips, you fall off a cliff. Those runes are gone, and it's not temporary, it's forever. There's no worse feeling than just realizing you lost a ton of progress, basically because you weren't careful enough getting back to the spot you died at, or just had a brain fart and rushed too much and made a mistake. It happens to everyone once in a while, and it's always a wake-up call, but you had to kind of get used to this after a while. That said, when you lose runes because of a seemingly avoidable mistake, you kind of just hate the world for a few minutes. At number 5, there are no trackers or quest markers at all. One thing that's definitely a shock to the system compared to other open world games is how little hand-holding there is in Elden Ring. Then again, it is from software, so to some extent it's not surprising, but people who are used to having big quest markers that guide them to the next location are in for a bit of a rude awakening in this game, because there's almost none of that. Like, where do you go? What are you supposed to do? Well, you're supposed to figure that out. There are NPCs that give you some vague clues and advice, but for the most part, you're basically figuring that out yourself. Obviously, for some people, that is too much to ask. They've been sort of accustomed to a type of game that tells them exactly what the next thing to do is. And I don't know if you're maybe detecting some notes here in terms of my own opinion on this, but this is definitely one of those kind of love-hate things about the game. Some people absolutely love how hands-off the game is, while other people struggle with it. I fall into the former category personally. But this is especially notable when you're trying to do character quests. The game does not mark NPC locations, like at all. So it's basically up to you to remember where everyone is scattered across the huge world. There's a reason some people recommend like having a legal pad handy for the game, because there's a lot of NPCs just hanging around in random spots, and if you forget where they are, then trying to hunt them down in this enormous open world without any indicators can be a little frustrating. At least the character quests are somewhat logical compared to previous entries in the franchise, but there's definitely still some head scratchers where someone will say something and you'll be like, what? Who? Where do I go for that? What is going on? And some people really hate that feeling. Being sort of accustomed to it and knowing the adventure that ensues from it, I actually love it, but I can understand the hate to a certain degree. At number 4, getting teleported to that horrible bug dungeon. If you've been playing this game for a while, you know what we're talking about. You're wandering around Limgrave, taking it easy, you're slapping around some soldiers, monsters, no problem, who cares? And then you find some innocuous looking chest and you open it. You're expecting treasure, but instead you get a face full of gas and it transports you to this horrible place, the Celia Crystal Tunnel. It sucks, because you could potentially get sent here basically right after getting into the open world. Like, there's one of these chests in the Dragonburt ruins not far from the first checkpoint, and this place is tough enough for relatively high level players, so if you're just starting out, it's brutal. What makes this place so horrible is these nasty centipede men who hit real hard, and they take a lot of hits on top of that, which is bad enough as it is, but they also have one of the all-time worst range attacks where they shoot multiple fast-moving spikes that also hit incredibly hard. And to make things extra annoying, they also track you. And that's not it though, because if you hoped death would send you back to the last checkpoint, no such luck there. If you die, you start right back in the little shack you got teleported to, so if you want out of here, you gotta either attempt to fight your way out, which probably isn't gonna work too well, or make a run for it. And of course, they put these bug guys in the worst possible spots, so trying to run out can be pretty tough. The whole trap's kind of a cruel joke meant to mess up first-time players. Once you sort of figure out a good route, getting out of here is not terrible, but death is pretty much guaranteed before that. Previous Souls games made players fear chests because they'd sometimes contain traps, but in this game they're almost worse. Sometimes you just get teleported someplace you're totally unprepared for. The developers clearly want you to just hate chests for this one. This is just cruel. And number 3, basilisks are back, and they are worse than ever. Everyone hated these things in the old games, and they suck here too. The basilisks are these weird-looking lizards with big eyes, a little mouth, and an insatiable urge to spread instant death-causing gas everywhere they go. They tend to show up in the darkest and dankest parts of the game too, and dealing with them is never an easy thing. I mean, unless you shoot them with arrows from far away, but a lot of times you don't really get that option because they're hiding, ready to ambush you, or packed tightly in awkward positions. To make them more hateable though, From Software somehow found a way to make them worse. They're more aggressive, they seem to take more hits, and their death fog spreads out way more than it used to. In older games it's pretty simple to just walk behind them and beat on them while they're spreading their gas, because it mostly goes forward, but that's not going to work here. The gas pretty much goes everywhere, and it surrounds them instead, so trying to melee them is basically a death sentence. Nobody likes these things, nobody wants them to make a return, and they probably appear more in this game than any previous game before it. Seriously, play the game enough and you will be seeing these things everywhere. They know we hate them, and they don't care. Hell, they probably think that it is hilarious. And number 2 is the endless poison swamps. Speaking of things that everyone hates but keep showing up, oh yeah, poison swamps. We're gonna talk about this for a minute. In a pre-release interview, the director of the game, Miyazaki himself, even admitted that he just can't help himself. He just has this insane compulsion to put ugly and horrible poison-filled death swamps into his games. In some ways, these swamps aren't actually as bad in this game, at least at first. One of the biggest can be found in Caelid, a place you can access right at the start of the game, but there's one thing that makes it not so bad to deal with. You just ride your spirit steed through it with no danger of getting poisoned. But if you thought the developers were going to go easy on us, think again. There are multiple other areas where you're forced to go through the poison swamps on foot, and you can't do anything about it. There's a poison-filled castle, an entire underground area filled with super poison, and maybe the worst of all is this area inside a hollowed out tree where you can't even run through the swamp. It's so high, the best you can do is walk and chug potions so you don't die as quickly. Like the basilisks, this game has maybe the most poison swamps in any From game ever. And while it's kind of hilarious seeing them double down on such a hated mechanic, it doesn't make us hate it any less. Like, if they thought eventually it was going to cause Stockholm Syndrome, they were wrong. And finally, at number 1, people who put messages under ladders. This is more of a pure annoyance than anything else. Like, troll messages are plentiful, but they're mostly because of what they say, not because of the location. When people put messages at the step of a ladder, they're doing it for one reason and one reason alone: to be annoying. And that's because the button to look at messages is the same button as to climb ladders. So if you actually want to climb a ladder, you have to go through an annoying process of properly lining your character up, scrolling through the available options to actually select the ladder, and then finally actually climbing it. All in all, it's a small thing, but it's super annoying. The only reason anyone's doing it is basically to make it take longer to go up the ladder, which is an intended thing to just annoy you. That's all it is. So if you're in a hurry and trying to run away from enemies, you have to take a little extra time, and you have to select the ladder, and that means, hey, you're dead. It's a simple but a highly effective troll, and for that,